Chapter 4. Mark these three. They are all that give shape, all that lie beneath the surface of the world. These three, they are the bones of history. Sister of cold nights, betrayal greets your dawn. You choose to trust the knife, even as it found your heart. Draconis, blood of Tyam. Darkness was made to embrace your soul, and these chains that now hold you, they are of your own fashioning. Krull, yours was the path the sleeping goddess chose 1,000 and more years ago, and she sleeps still, even as you awaken. The time has come, Ancient One, to once more walk among the mortals, and make of your grief the sweetest gift. Anamandaris, Fisher Keltath. Covered from head to toe in mud, Harlow and Stony Manakis emerged from behind the carriage as it rocked its way up the slope. Grinning at the sight, Gruntle leaned against the buckboard. "Serves us right to lay wagers with you," Harlow muttered. "You always win, you bastard." Stony was looking down at her smeared clothing with dismay. "Callow's leathers, they'll never recover." She fixed hard blue eyes on Gruntle. "Damn you, you're the biggest of us all. Should have been you pushing, not sitting up there, and never mind winning any bet." "Hard lessons, that's me," the man said, his grin broadening. Stony's fine green and black attire was covered in brown slime. Her thick black hair hung down over her face, dripping milky water. "Anyway, we're done for the day, so let's pull this thing off to the side. Looks like you two could do with a swim." "I'd take you," Harlow snapped. "What do you think we was doing?" "From the sounds, I'd say drowning. The clean water's upstream, by the way." Gruntle gathered the tresses again. The crossing had left the horses exhausted, reluctant to move, and it took some cajoling on the captain's part to get them moving again. He halted the carriage a short distance off to one side of the ford. Other merchants had camped nearby, some having just managed the crossing and others preparing to do so on their way to Darujistan. In the past few days, the situation had, if anything, become even more chaotic. Whatever had remained of the ford's laid cobbles in the riverbed had been pushed either askew or deeper into the mud. It had taken 4 bells to manage the crossing, and for a time there, Gruntle had wondered if they would ever succeed. He climbed down and turned his attention to the horses. Harlow and Stony, now bickering with each other, set off upstream. Gruntle threw an uneasy glance towards the massive carriage that had gone before them on the ford, now parked 50 paces away. It had been an unfair bet. The best kind, Gruntle thought. His 2 companions had been convinced that this day wouldn't see the crossing of their master Caruli's carriage. They had been certain that the monstrous vehicle ahead of them would bog down, that it'd be days sitting there in midstream before other merchants got impatient enough to add the muscle of their own crews to move it out of the way. Gruntle had suspected otherwise. Beauchelane and Corbel Broach were not the kind of people to stomach inconvenience. They're damn sorcerers, anyway. Their servant, Emancipor Reese, had not even bothered to get down from the driver's bench, and simple twitches of the tresses had led the train of oxen onwards. The huge contrivance seemed to glide across the ford, not even jolting as the wheels moved over what Gruntle knew to be churned, uneven footing. Unfair bet, aye. At least I'm trying clean. There had been enough witnesses to the unnatural event to accord a certain privacy to the Major's present encampment, so it was with considerable curiosity that Gruntle watched a caravan guard stride towards it. He knew the man well. At Daru, Buke worked the smaller caravanserai, signing with merchants just scraping by. He preferred working alone, and Gruntle knew why. Buke's master had tried the crossing earlier in the day. The dilapidated wagon had fallen to pieces in midstream, bits of wood and precious bundles of produce floating away as the master wallowed helplessly. Buke had managed to save the merchant, but with the loss of goods, the contract had ceased to exist. After making arrangements for the master to accompany a train back to Darujistan, Buke was, with scant gratitude for his efforts, cut loose by the merchant. Gruntle had expected him to make his own way back to the city. Buke had a fine, healthy, and well-equipped horse, a 3 days' journey at the most. Yet here he was, his tall, lean figure fully attired in a guard's accoutrements, scale hauberk freshly oiled, crossbow strapped aback, and longsword scabbarded at his hip, in quiet conversation with Emancipor Reese. Though out of earshot, Gruntle could follow the course of the conversation by the shifting postures of the 2 men. After a brief exchange, he saw Buke's shoulders drop fractionally. The grey-bearded guard glanced away. Emancipor Reese shrugged and half-turned in dismissal. Both men then swung about to face the carriage, and a moment later, Beauchelane emerged, drawing his black leather cape around his broad shoulders. Buke straightened under the sorcerer's attention, answered a few terse questions with equally terse replies, then gave a respectful nod. Beauchelane laid a hand on his servant's shoulder, and the old man came close to buckling under that light touch. Gruntle clucked softly in sympathy. Aye, that mage's touch could fill an average man's breeches, Queen knows. Very friend, Buke's just been hired. Pray he doesn't come to regret it. Tenement fires were deadly in Darujistan, especially when gas was involved. The conflagration that had killed Buke's wife, mother, and 4 children had been particularly ugly. That Buke himself had been lying drunk and dead to the world in an alley not 100 paces from the house hadn't helped in the man's recovery. Like many of his fellow guards, Gruntle had assumed that Buke would turn to the bottle with serious intent after that. Instead, he'd done the opposite. Taking solitary contracts with poor, vulnerable merchants obviously offered to Buke a greater appeal than the wasting descent of a permanent drunk. Poor merchants were robbed far more often than rich ones. The man wants to die, all right, but swiftly, even honourably. He wants to go down fighting, as did his family, by all accounts. Alas, when sober, as he's been ever since that night, Buke fights extremely well, and the ghosts of at least a dozen highwaymen would bitterly attest to that. The chill dread that seemed to infuse the air around Beauchelin, and especially around Corbel Broach, would have deterred any sane guard. But a man eager to embrace death would see it differently, wouldn't he? Ah, friend Buke, Gruntle thought, I hope you do not come to regret your choice. No doubt violence and horror swirls around your two new masters, but you're more likely to be a witness to it than a victim yourself. Haven't you been in suffering's embrace long enough? Buke set off to collect his horse and gear. Gruntle had begun a cookfire by the time the old man returned. He watched Buke stow his equipment and exchange a few more words with the Mansipor Reese, who had begun cooking a meal of their own. Then the man glanced over and met Gruntle's gaze. Buke strode over. A day of changes, friend Buke, Gruntle said from where he squatted beside the hearth. I'm brewing some tea for Harlow and Stony, who should be back any moment. Care to join us in a mug? That is kind of you, Gruntle. I will accept your offer. He approached the captain. Unfortunate what happened to Merck's wagon. I warned him against the attempt. Alas, he did not appreciate my advice. Even after you pulled him from the river and pumped the water out of his lungs? Buke shrugged. Hood brushing his lips put him in bad mood, I would imagine. He glanced over at his new master's carriage, lines crinkling the corners of his sad eyes. You have had discourse with them, have you not? Gruntle spat into the fire. Aye, better had you sought my advice before taking the contract. I respect your advice, and always have, Gruntle, but you would not have swayed me. I know that, so I'll say no more of them. The other one, Buke said, accepting a tin mug from Gruntle and cradling it in both hands as he blew on the steaming liquid. I caught a glimpse of him earlier. Corbel Broach. As you say. He's the killer, you realise? Between the two, I don't see much difference, to be honest. Buke was shaking his head. No, you misunderstand. In Darujistan, recall? For 2 weeks running, horribly mangled bodies were found in the Gadrobi district, every night. Then the investigators called in a mage to help, and it was as if someone had kicked a hornet's nest. That mage discovered something, and that knowledge had him terrified. It was quiet, grant you, but I chanced on the details that followed. Forken's guild was enlisted. The council itself set forth a contract to the assassins. Find the killer, they said, using every method at your disposal, legal or otherwise. Then the murder stopped. I vaguely recall a fuss, Gruntle said, frowning. You were in quips, weren't you? Blind for days on end. Gruntle winced. Had my eye on Lethrow, you know. Went out on a contract and came back to find she'd gone and married someone else. Buke finished, nodding. Not just someone else, Gruntle scowled. That bloated crook, Parsimo. An old master of yours, I seem to recall. Anyway, who was the killer, and why did the killing stop? Forken's guild did not step forward to claim the council's coin. The murder stopped because the murderer had left the city. Buke nodded towards the massive carriage. He's the one. Corbel Broach, the man with the round face and fat lips. What makes you so certain, Buke? The air had gone cold. Gruntle poured himself a second cup. The man shrugged, eyes on the fire. I just know. Who can abide the murder of innocents? Hold's breath, Buke, Gruntle thought. I see both edges to that question well enough. Do you? You mean to kill him, or at least die trying. Listen to me, friend. We may be out of the city's jurisdiction, but if Darujistan's mages were in truth so thoroughly alarmed, and given that Forken's guild might still have an interest, issues of jurisdiction are meaningless. We could send word back, assuming you're right, and you've proof of your certainty, Buke, and in the meantime, you just keep your eye on the man. Nothing else. He's a sorcerer, mark my words. You won't stand a chance. Leave the execution to the assassins and mages. Buke glanced up at the arrival of Harlow and Stony Manakis. The two had come up quietly, each wrapped in blankets, with their clothing washed and bundled in their arms. Their troubled expressions told Gruntle they'd heard at the very least his last statement. Thought you'd be halfway back to Darujistan, Harlow said. Buke studied the guard over the rim of the mug. You are so clean, I barely recognise you, friend. Ha ha. I have found myself a new contract to answer you, Harlow. You idiot, Stony snapped. When are you going to get some sense back into your head, Buke? It's been years and years since you last cracked a smile or let any light into your eyes. How many bear traps are you going to stick your head in, man? Until one snaps, Buke said, meeting Stony's dark, angry eyes. He rose, tossing to one side the dregs from the mug. Thank you for the tea. And advice, friend Gruntle. With a nod to Harlow, then Stony, he headed back to Beauchelin's carriage. Gruntle stared up at Stony. Impressive tact, my dear. She hissed. The man's a fool. He needs a woman's hand on his sword grip, if you ask me. Needs it bad. Harlow grunted. You volunteering? Stony Manakis shrugged. It's not his appearance that one balks at. It's his attitude. The very opposite of you, ape. Sweet on my personality, are you? Harlow grinned over at Gruntle. Hey, you could break my nose again. Then we could straighten it, and I'd be good as new. What say you, Stony? Would the iron petals of your heart unfold for me? She sneered. Everyone knows that two-handed sword of yours is nothing but a pathetic attempt at compensation, Harlow. He's a nice turn at the poetic, though, Gruntle pointed out. Iron petals. You couldn't get more precise than that. There's no such thing as iron petals, Stony snorted. You don't get iron flowers, and hearts aren't flowers. They're big red messy things in your chest. What's poetic about not making sense? You're as big an idiot as Buke and Harlow, Gruntle. I'm surrounded by thick-skulled, witless fools. It's your lot in life, alas, Gruntle said. Here, have some tea. You could do with the warmth. She accepted the mug, while Gruntle and Harlow avoided meeting each other's eyes. After a few moments, Stony cleared her throat. What was all that about leaving the execution to assassins, Gruntle? What kind of mess has Buke got himself into now? Oh, Maori, she truly cares for the man, Gruntle thought. He frowned into the fire and tossed in a few more lumps of dung before replying. He has some suspicions. We were speaking hypothetically. Dog's tongue you were, Oxface. Out with it. Buke chose to speak with me, not you, Stony, Gruntle growled, irritated. If you've questions, ask them of him, and leave me out of it. I will, damn you. I doubt you'll get anywhere, Harlow threw in, somewhat unwisely, even if you do bat your eyes and pout those rosy lips of yours. Those are the last things you'll see when I push my knife through that tin tuber in your chest. Oh, and I'll blow a kiss, too. Harlow's bushy brows rose. Tin tuber? Stony, my dear, did I hear you right? Shut up, I'm not in the mood. You're never in the mood, Stony. She answered him with a contemptuous smile. Don't bother saying it, dear, Gruntle sighed. The shack leaned drunkenly against the city of Pale's inner wall, a confused collection of wooden planks, stretched hides and wicker, its yard a threshold of white dust, gourd husks, bits of broken crockery and wood shavings. Fragments of lacquered wooden cards hung from twine above the narrow door, slowly twisting in the humid heat. Quickben paused, glanced up and down the littered alleyway, then stepped into the yard. A cackle sounded from within. The wizard rolled his eyes and, muttering under his breath, reached for the leather loop nailed to the door. Don't push! A voice shrieked behind it. Pull, you snake of the desert! Shrugging, Quickben tugged the door towards him. Only fools push, hissed the old woman from her cross-legged perch on a reed mat just within. Scrapes my knees. Bruises and worse plague me when fools come to visit. Ah, I sniffed Varaku, didn't I? The wizard peered into the shack's interior. Hood's breath, there's only room for you in there. Vague objects cluttered the walls, dangled from the low ceiling. Shadows swallowed every corner, and the air still held the chill of the night just past. Just me, the woman cackled. Her face was little more than skin over bones, her pace hairless and blotched with moles. Show what you have, many-headed snake. The breaking of curses is my gift. She withdrew from the tattered folds of her robes a wooden card, held it up in trembling hands. Send your words into my warren, and their shape shall be carved hereupon, burned true. No curses, woman, Quickben said, crouching down until his eyes were level with hers. Only questions. The card slipped beneath her robes. Scowling, the witch said, Answers cost plenty. Answers are worth more than the breaking of curses. Answers are not easily found. All right. How much? Colour the coin of your questions, 12 souls. Gold. Then gold councils, 1 for each. Provided you give worthy answer. Agreed. Burn sleep. What of it? Why? The old woman gaped toothlessly. Why does the goddess sleep, witch? Does anyone know? Do you? You are a learned scoundrel. All I've read has been speculation. No one knows. Scholars don't have the answer. But this world's oldest witch of tennis just might. Tell me, why does Burn sleep? Some answers must be danced around. Give me another question, child of Varaku. Sighing, Quickben lowered his head, studied the ground for a moment, then said, It said the earth shakes, and molten rock pours out like blood when Burn stirs towards wakefulness. So it is said, and that destruction would be visited upon all life were she to awaken. So it is said. Well, nothing. The land shakes, mountains explode, hot rivers flow. These are natural things of a world whose soul is white hot, bound to their own laws of cause and effect. The world is shaped like a beetle's ball of dung, and it travels through a chilling void around the sun. The surface floats in pieces on a sea of molten rock. Sometimes the pieces grind together. Sometimes they pull apart, pulled and pushed by tides as the seas are pulled and pushed. And where is the goddess in such a scheme? She was the egg within the dung, hatched long ago. Her mind rides the hidden rivers beneath our feet. She is the pain of existence, the queen of the hive, and we her workers and soldiers. And every now and then, we swarm. Into the warrens? The old woman shrugged. By whatever paths we find. Burn is sick. Aye. Quickben saw a sudden intensity like the witch's dark eyes. He thought for a long moment, then said, Why does Burn sleep? It's not yet time for that. Ask another question. The wizard frowned, looked away. Workers and soldiers. You make us sound like slaves. She demands nothing. What you do for yourselves. You work to earn sustenance. You fight to protect it or to gain more. You work to confound rivals. You fight from fear and hatred and spite and honour and loyalty and whatever other courses you might fashion. Yet all that you do serves her, no matter what you do. Not simply benign, a défendelat, but amoral. We can thrive or we can destroy ourselves. It matters not to her. She will simply birth another brood, and it begins again. You speak of the world as a physical thing, subject to natural laws. Is that all it is? No. In the end, the minds and senses of all that is alive define what is real. Real for us, that is. That's a tautology. So it is. Is burn the cause to our effect? Ah, you whine sideways like the desert snake you are in truth. Ask your question. Why does Burn sleep? She sleeps to dream. Quick Ben said nothing for a long time. When he finally looked into the old woman's eyes, he saw confirmation of his greatest fears. She is sick, he said. The witch nodded. Fevered. And her dreams. Delirium descends, lad. Dreams become nightmares. I need to think of a way to excise that infection, because I don't think Burn's fever will be enough. If anything, that heat that's meant to cleanse is achieving the opposite effect. Think on it then, dearest worker. I may need help. The witch held out a withered hand, palm up. Quick Ben fished beneath his shirt and withdrew a water-worn pebble. He dropped it into her hand. When the time comes, a défendelat, call upon me. I shall. Thank you, mistress. He set a small leather bag filled with gold counsels on the ground between them. The witch cackled. Quick Ben backed away. Now shut that door. I prefer the cold. As the wizard strode down the alley, his thoughts wandered loose, darted and whipped on gusts. Most of the currents false and without significance. One, however, snagged in his mind and stayed with him, at first meaningless, a curiosity and nothing more. She prefers the cold. Strange. Most old people like heat, and plenty of it. Captain Parron saw Quick Ben leaning against the pitted wall beside the headquarters entrance, arms wrapped tightly about himself and looking ill-tempered. The 4 soldiers stationed as guards were all gathered 10 paces away from the mage, showing obvious unease. Parron led his horse forward by the reins, handed them to a stabler who appeared from the compound gateway, then strode towards Quick Ben. You look miserable, mage, and that makes me nervous. The 7 Cities native scowled. You don't want to know, Captain. Trust me in this. If it concerns the bridge burners, I'd better hear it, Quick Ben. The bridge burners? He barked a humourless laugh. This goes far beyond a handful of belly-aching soldiers, sir. At the moment, though, I haven't worked out any possible solutions. When I do, I'll lay it all out for you. In the meantime, you might want to requisition a fresh mount. We're to join Dujek and Whiskey Jack at Brood's camp. Immediately. The whole company. I just got them settled. No, sir. You, me, Mallet and Spindle. There have been some unusual developments, I gather. But don't ask me what, because I don't know. Parron grimaced. I've sent for the other 2 already, sir. Very well. I'll go find myself another horse then. The captain swung about and headed towards the compound, trying to ignore the fiery pain in his stomach. Everything was taking too long. The army had been sitting here in Pale for months now, and the city didn't want it. With the outlawing, none of the expected imperial support had arrived, and without that administrative infrastructure, there had been no relief from the tense, unpleasant role of occupiers. The Malazan system of conquest followed a set of rules that was systematic and effective. The victorious army was never meant to remain in place beyond the peacekeeping transition and hand over to a firmly entrenched and fully functioning civil government in the Malazan style. Civic control was not a burden the army had been trained for. It was best achieved through bureaucratic manipulation of the conquered city's economy. Hold those strings, and the people will dance for you, had been the core belief of the emperor, and he'd proved the truth of it again and again. Nor did the empress venture any alterations to the method. Acquiring that control involved both the imposition of legal authority and a thorough infiltration of whatever black market happened to be operating at the time. Since you could never crush a black market, the next best thing is to run it. And that task belonged to the Claw. But there are no Claw agents, are there? Parron thought. No scroll scribblers, either. We don't control the black market. We can't even manage the above-board economy, much less run a civil administration. Yet we continue to proceed as if imperial support is imminent, when it most decidedly is not. I don't understand this at all. Without the Darujistan gold, Dujek's army would be starving right now. Desertions would have begun, as soldier after soldier left with the hope of returning to the imperial embrace, or seeking to join mercenary companies or caravanserai. One arm's army would vanish before his very eyes. Loyalty never survives a pinched stomach, he thought. After some confusion, the stablers found Parron another mount. He wearily swung himself into the saddle and guided the animal out of the compound. The afternoon sun had begun to throw cooling shadows onto the city's bleached streets. Pale's denizens began emerging, though few lingered anywhere near the Malazan headquarters. The guards held a finely honed sense of suspicion for anyone who hovered over long, and the assault issue heavy crossbows cradled in their arms were kept locked back. Blood had been spilled at the headquarters entrance and within the building itself. A hound of shadow had attacked, not so long ago, leaving a score dead. Parron's memories of that event were still fragmentary. The beast had been driven off by Tattersall and the captain himself. For the soldiers on guard at the headquarters, however, a peaceful posting had turned into a nightmare. They'd been caught woefully unprepared, a carelessness that would not be repeated. Such a hound would still scythe through them almost effortlessly, but at least they would go down fighting, not staring slack-jawed. Perrin found Quick Ben, Mallet, and Spindle awaiting him astride their own horses. Of the three, the captain knew Spindle the least. The short, bald man's skills ranged from sorcery to sapping, also he'd been told. His eternally sour disposition did not invite conversation, nor did the foul-smelling, thigh-length black and grey hair shirt he wore, woven from his dead mother's hair, if the rumour held any truth. As Perrin pulled in alongside the man, he glanced at that shirt. Hood's breath, that could be an old woman's hair, he thought. The realisation made him even more nauseous. Take point, Spindle. Aye, Captain. We'll have a real crush to push through when we hit North Market Round. So find us a way round the place. Them alleys ain't safe, sir. Access your warren, then, and let it bleed enough to make hairs stand on end. You can do that, can't you? Spindle glanced at Quick Ben. Sir, my warren triggers things. Serious things? Well, not really. Proceed, soldier. Aye, Captain. Expressionless, Quick Ben took rear position, whilst an equally silent Mallet rode alongside Perrin. Any idea what's going on at Brood's camp, Healer? The captain asked. Not specifically, sir, Mallet replied. Just sensations. He continued after an inquiring glance from Perrin. A real brew of powers over there, sir. Not just Brood and the Tister Andy. I'm familiar with those. And Calors, too, for that matter. No, there's something else. Another presence. Old, yet new. Hints of Talan Imas, maybe. Talan Imas? Maybe. I'm just not sure, truth to tell, Captain. It's overpowering everyone else, though. Perrin's head turned at that. A cat yowled nearby, followed by a flash of grey as the creature darted along the garden wall, then vanished from sight. More yowls sounded, this time from the other side of the narrow street. A shiver danced up Perrin's spine. He shook himself. The last thing we need is a new player. The situation's tense enough as it is. Two dogs locked in a vicious fight tumbled from an alley mouth just ahead. A panicked cat zigzagged around the snarling, snapping beasts. As one, the horses shied, ears flattening. In the drain gutter to their right, the captain saw, with widening eyes, a score of rats scampering parallel to them. What in Hood's name? Spindle! Quick Ben called from behind them. The lead sorcerer twisted in his saddle, a miserable expression on his weathered face. Ease off some, Quick Ben instructed, not unkindly. Spindle nodded, turned back. Perrin waved buzzing flies from his face. Mallet, what warren does Spindle call upon? He asked quietly. It's not his warren that's the problem, sir. It's how he channels it. This has been mild so far, all things considered. Must be a nightmare for our cavalry. We're foot soldiers, sir, Mallet pointed out with a dry grin. In any case, I've seen him break up an enemy charge all by himself. Needless to say, he's useful to have around. Perrin had never before seen a cat run headfirst into a wall. The dull thud was followed by a crazed scraping of claws as the animal bounced away in stunned surprise. Its antics were enough to attract the attention of the two dogs. A moment later, they set off after the cat. All three vanished down another alley. The captain's own nerves were jittering, adding to the discomfort in his belly. I could call Quick Ben to point and have him take over, but his is a power that would get noticed, he thought. Sensed from afar, in fact, and I'd rather not risk that. Nor, I suspect, would he. Each neighbourhood they passed through rose in cacophony. The spitting of cats, the howling and barking of dogs, and the braying of mules. Rats raced round the group on all sides, as mindless as lemmings. When Perrin judged that they had circumvented the market round, he called forward to Spindle to yield his warren. The man did so with a sheepish nod. A short while later they reached Northgate and rode out onto what had once been a killing field. Vestiges of that siege remained, if one looked carefully amidst the tawny grasses. Rotting pieces of clothing, the glint of rivets, and the bleached white of splintered bones. Midsummer flowers cloaked the flanks of the recent barrows 200 paces to their left in swathes of brittle blue, the hue deepening as the sun sank lower behind the mounds. Perrin was glad for the relative quiet of the plain, despite the heavy, turgid air of restless death that he felt seeping into his marrow as they crossed the scarred killing field. It seems I'm ever riding through such places. Since that fated day in Itko Khan, with angry wasps stinging me for disturbing their blood-drenched feast, I have been stumbling along in Hood's wake. I feel as if I've known naught but war and death all my life, though in truth it's been but a scant few years. Queen of Dreams, it makes me feel old. He scowled. Self-pity could easily become a well-worn path in his thoughts, unless he remained mindful of its insipid allure. Habits inherited from my father and mother, alas. And whatever portion Sister Tavora received, she must have somehow shunted onto me. Cold and canny as a child, even more so as an adult. If anyone can protect our house during Lassine's latest purge of the nobility, it will be her. No doubt I'd recoil from using whatever tactics she's chosen, but she's not the type to accept defeat. Thus, better her than me. Nonetheless, unease continued to gnaw Perrin's thoughts. Since the outlawing, they'd heard virtually nothing of events occurring elsewhere in the Empire. Rumours of a pending rebellion in 7 cities persisted, though that was a promise oft whispered, but yet to be unleashed. Perrin had his doubts. No matter what, Tavora will take care of Felicin. That, at least, I can take comfort from. Mallet interrupted his thoughts. I believe Brood's command tent is in the Tista Andi camp, Captain. Straight ahead. Spindle agrees with you, Perrin observed. The mage was leading them unerringly to that strange, even from a distance, and eerie encampment. No one was visible maintaining vigil at the pickets. In fact, the captain saw no one at all. Looks like the parley went off as planned, the healer commented. We haven't been cut down by a sleet of quarrels yet. I too take that as promising, Perrin said. Spindle led them into a kind of main avenue between the tall, sombre tents of the Tista Andi. Dusk had begun to fall. The tattered strips of cloth tied to the tent poles were losing their already faded colours. A few shadowy, spectral figures appeared from the various side trackways, paying the group little heed. A place to drag the spirit low, Mallet muttered under his breath. The captain nodded. Like travelling a dark dream, he thought. That must be Brood's tent, up ahead, the healer continued. 2 figures waited outside the utilitarian command tent, their attention on Perrin and his soldiers. Even in the gloom, the captain had no trouble identifying them. The visitors drew their horses to a halt, then dismounted and approached. Whiskey Jack wasted little time. Captain, I need to speak with your soldiers. Commander Dujek wishes to do the same with you. Perhaps we can all gather afterwards, if you're so inclined. The heightened propriety of Whiskey Jack's words put Perrin's nerves on edge. He simply nodded in reply. Then, as the bearded second-in-command marched off with Mallet, Quickben and Spindle following, the captain fixed his attention on Dujek. The veteran studied Perrin's pace for a moment, then sighed. We've received news from the Empire, Captain. How, sir? Dujek shrugged. Nothing direct, of course, but our sources are reliable. Lassine's cult of the nobility proved efficient. He hesitated, then said, The Empress has a new adjunct. Perrin slowly nodded. There was nothing surprising in that. Lorne was dead. The position needed to be filled. Have you news of my family, sir? Your sister Tavora salvaged what she could, lad. The Perrin holdings in Unter, the outlying estates, most of the trade agreements. Even so, your father passed away, and a short while later, your mother elected to join him on the other side of Hood's Gate. I am sorry, Gallowes. Yes, she would do that, wouldn't she? He thought. Sorry? Aye, as am I. Thank you, sir. To be honest, I'm less shocked by that news than you might think. There's more, I'm afraid. Your, outlawry left your house exposed. I don't think your sister saw much in the way of options. The cull promised to be savage. Clearly, Tavora had been planning things for some time. She well knew what was coming. Noble-born children were being raped, then murdered. The order to have every noble-born child under marrying age slain was never made official. Perhaps indeed Lassine was unaware of what was going on. I beg you, sir, if Felicin is dead, tell me so, and leave out the details. Dujek shook his head. No, she was spared that, Captain. That is what I am trying to tell you. And what did Tavora sell to achieve that, sir? Even as the new adjunct, Tavora's powers were limited. She could not be seen to reveal any particular favoritism, or so I choose to read her intentions. Baron closed his eyes. Adjunct Tavora, he thought. Well, sister, you knew your own ambition. Felicin? The Elder Darrell mines, Captain. Not a life sentence, you can be sure of that. Once the fires cool in Unter, she will no doubt be quietly retrieved. Only if Tavora judges it to be without risk to her reputation. Dujek's eyes widened. Her rep... I don't mean among the nobility. They can call her a monster all they want, as I'm sure they're doing right now. She does not care. Never did. I mean her professional reputation, Commander. In the eyes of the Empress and her court. For Tavora, nothing else will matter. Thus, she is well suited to be the new adjunct. Perrin's voice was toneless, the words measured and even. In any case, as you said, she was forced to make do with the situation. And as to that situation, I am to blame for all that's happened, sir. The cull, the rapes, the murders, the deaths of my parents, and all that Felicin must now endure. Captain! It's all right, sir, Perrin smiled. The children of my parents are, one and all, capable of virtually anything. We can survive the consequences. Perhaps we lack normal conscience. Perhaps we are monsters in truth. Thank you for the news, Commander. How went the parley? Perrin did all he could to ignore the quiet grief in Dujek's eyes. It went well, Captain, the old man whispered. You will depart in 2 days, barring Quickben, who will catch up later. No doubt your soldiers are ready for... Yes, sir, they are. Very good. That is all, Captain. Sir. Like the laying of a silent shroud, darkness arrived. Perrin stood atop the vast barrow, his face caressed by the mildest of winds. He had managed to leave the encampment without running into Whiskey Jack and the bridge burners. Night had a way of inviting solitude, and he felt welcome on this mass grave with all its echoing memories of pain, anguish, and despair. Among the dead beneath me, he thought, how many adult voices cried out for their mothers? Death and dying makes us into children once again, in truth, one last time. there in our final wailing cries. More than one philosopher has claimed that we ever remain children, far beneath the indurated layers that make up the armor of adulthood. Armor encumbers, restricts the body and soul within it, but it also protects. Blows are blunted, feelings lose their edge, leaving us to suffer naught but a plague of bruises, and, after a time, bruises fade. Tilting his head back triggered sharp protests from the muscles on his neck and shoulders. He stared skyward, blinking against the pain, the tautness of his flesh wrapped around bones like a prisoner's bindings. But there's no escape, is there? He thought. Memories and revelations settle in like poisons, never to be expunged. He drew the cooling air deep into his lungs, as if seeking to capture in the breath of the stars their coldness of regard, their indifferent harshness. There are no gifts in suffering. Witness the Tista Andi. Well, at least the stomach's gone quiet. Building, I suspect, for another eye-watering bout. Bats flitted through the darkness overhead, wheeling and darting as they fed on the wing. The city of Pale flickered to the south like a dying hearth. Far to the west rose the hulking peaks of the Maranth Mountains. Perrin slowly realized that his folded arms now gripped his sides, struggling to hold all within. He was not a man of tears, nor did he rail at all about him. He had been born to a carefully sculpted, cool detachment, an education his soldier's training only enhanced. If such things are qualities, he thought, then she has humbled me. Devora, you are indeed the master of such schooling. Oh, dearest Felicin, what life have you now found for yourself? Not the protective embrace of the nobility, that's for certain. Boots sounded behind him. Perrin closed his eyes. No more news, please, he thought. No more revelations. Captain, Whiskey Jack settled a hand on Perrin's shoulder. A quiet night, the captain observed. We looked for you, Perrin, after your words with Dujek. It was Silver Fox who quested outward, found you. The hand withdrew. Whiskey Jack stood alongside him, also studying the stars. Who is Silver Fox? I think, the bearded veteran rumbled, that's for you to decide. Frowning, Perrin faced the commander. I've little patience for riddles at the moment, sir. Whiskey Jack nodded, eyes still on the glittering sweep of the night sky. You will just have to suffer the indulgence, Captain. I can lead you forward a step at a time, or with a single shove from behind. There may be a time when you look back on this moment and come to appreciate which of the two I chose. Perrin bit back a retort, said nothing. They await us at the base of the barrow, Whiskey Jack continued. As private an occasion as I could manage. Just Mallet, Quickben, the Mybe, and Silver Fox. Your squad members are here in case you have, doubts. They've both exhausted their warrants this night, to assure the veracity of what has occurred. What? Perrin snapped. Are you trying to say, sir? Whiskey Jack met the captain's eyes. The Rivy child, Silver Fox. She is Tattersail reborn. Perrin slowly turned, gaze travelling down to the foot of the barrow, where four figures waited in the darkness. And there stood the Rivy child, a sunrise aura about her person, a penumbra of power that stirred the wilder blood that coursed within him. Yes, she is the one. Older now, revealing what she will become. Damn it, woman, you never could keep things simple. All that was trapped within him seemed to wash through his limbs, leaving him weak and suddenly shivering. He stared down at Silver Fox. She is a child. But I knew that, didn't I? He thought. I've known that for a while. I just didn't want to think about it. And now, no choice. Whiskey Jack grunted. She grows swiftly. There are eager, impatient forces within her, too powerful for a child's body to contain. You'll not have long before propriety arrives, Perrin finished dryly, not noticing Whiskey Jack's start. Fine for then. What of now? Who will naught but see me as a monster, should we even so much as hold hands? What can I say to her? What can I possibly say? He spun to Whiskey Jack. This is impossible. She is a child. And within her is Tattersail. And Nightchill. Nightchill! Whose breath? What has happened? How? Questions not easily answered, lad. You'd do better to ask them of Mallet and Quickben, and of Silver Fox herself. Perrin involuntarily took a step back. Speak with her? No, I cannot. She wishes it, Perrin. She awaits you now. No. His eyes were once again pulled downslope. I see Tattersail, yes, but there's more. Not just this Nightchill woman. She's a soul-taker now, Whiskey Jack. The creature that gave her her Rivy name, the power to change. The commander's eyes narrowed. How do you know, Captain? I just know. Not good enough. It wasn't easy for Quickben to glean that truth. Yet you know. How, Perrin? The captain grimaced. I felt Quickben's probings in my direction, when he thinks my attention is elsewhere. I've seen the wariness in his eyes. What has he found, Commander? Opon's abandoned you, but something else has taken its place. Something savage. His hackles rise whenever you're close. Hackles? Perrin smiled. An apt choice of word. Anamanda Rake killed 2 hounds of shadow. I was there. I saw it. I felt the stain of a dying hound's blood on my flesh, Whiskey Jack. Something of that blood now runs in my veins. The commander's voice was deadpan. What else? There has to be something else, sir? Yes. Quick Ben caught hints. There's much more than simply an ascendant's blood to what you've become. Whiskey Jack hesitated, then said, Silver Fox has fashioned for you a Rivy name. Jenice and Rule. Jenice and Rule. It translates as, the Wanderer within the Sword. It means, she says, that you have done something no other creature has ever done, mortal or ascendant, and that something has set you apart. You have been marked, Ganoes Paran, yet no one, not even Silver Fox, knows what it portends. Tell me what happened. Paran shrugged. Rake used that black sword of his, when he killed the hounds. I followed them, into that sword. The spirits of the hounds were trapped, chained with all the others. I think I freed them, sir. I can't be sure of that. All I know is that they ended up somewhere else, no longer chained. And have they returned to this world? I don't know. Jenice and Rule, why should there be any significance to my having wandered within that sword? Whiskey Jack grunted. You're asking the wrong man, Captain. I'm only repeating what Silver Fox has said. One thing, though, that has just occurred to me. He stepped closer. Not a word to the Tista Andi, not Corlat, not Anamanda Rake. The Son of Darkness is an unpredictable bastard by all accounts, and if the legend of Dragnapur is true, the curse of that sword of his is that no one escapes its nightmare prison. Their souls are chained, forever. You've cheated that, and perhaps the hounds have as well. You've set an alarming precedent. Paran smiled bitterly in the darkness. Cheated? Yes, I have cheated many things, even death. But not pain, he thought. No, that escape still eludes me. You think Rake takes much comfort in the belief of his sword's finality. Seems likely, Ganoes Paran, does it not? The captain sighed. Aye. Now, let us go down to meet Silver Fox. No. Damn you, Paran, Whiskey Jack growled. This is about more than just you and her all starry-eyed. That child possesses power, and it's vast and unknown. Callow has murder in his eyes when he looks at her. Silver Fox is in danger. The question is, do we protect her or stand aside? The High King calls her an abomination, Captain. Should Caladan Brood turn his back at the wrong moment, he'll kill her? Why? He fears, I gather, the power within her. Hood's breath, she's just a... He stopped, realizing the venality of the assertion. Just a child, he thought. Hardly. Protect her against Calor, you said. That's a risky position to assume, Commander. Who stands with us? For that, and by extension, all of the Tista Andi. Anamanda Rake? That we don't yet know. Corlat's mistrust of Calor, coupled with a friendship with the Maibe, has guided her to her decision. She says she will speak with her master when he arrives. Arrives? Aye. Tomorrow. Possibly early. And if so, you'd best avoid him, if at all possible. Paran nodded. One meeting was enough, he thought. And the warlord? Undecided, we think. But Brood needs the Rithi and they're better in herds. For the moment, at least, he remains the girl's chief protector. And what does Dujek think of all this? The captain asked. He awaits your decision. Mine? Berufen, Commander. I'm no mage or priest, nor can I glean the child's future. Tattersail resides within Silver Fox, Paran. She must be drawn forth, to the fore. Because Tattersail would never betray us. Yes, now I see. You needn't sound so miserable about it, Paran. No, he thought. And if you stood in my place, Whiskey Jack? Very well. Lead on. It seems, Whiskey Jack said, striding to the edge of the Barrow's summit, we will have to promote you to a rank equal to mine, Captain, if only to circumvent your confusion as to who commands who around here. Their arrival was a quiet, stealthy affair, leading their mounts into the encampment with a minimum of fuss. Few Tista Andi remained outside their tents to take note. Sergeant Anstey led the main group of bridgeburners towards the kraal to settle in the horses, whilst Corporal Picker, Detoran, Blend, Trots, and Hedge slipped away to find Brood's command tent. Spindle awaited them at its entrance. Picker gave him a nod, and the mage, wrapped in his foul-smelling hair shirt, with its equally foul hood thrown over his head, turned to face the tied-down entrance flap. He made a series of hand gestures, paused, then spat at the canvas. There was no sound as the spit struck the flap. He swung a grin to Picker, then bowed before the entrance in invitation. Hedge nudged the corporal and rolled his eyes. There were 2 rooms within, she knew, and the warlord was sleeping in the back one. Hopefully, Picker thought. Picker looked around for Blend. Damn, where is she? Here a moment ago. 2 fingers brushed her arm, and she nearly leapt out of her leathers. Beside her, Blend smiled. Picker mouthed a silent stream of curses. Blend's smile broadened, then she stepped past, up to the tent entrance, where she crouched down to untie the fastenings. Picker glanced over her shoulder. Detoran and Trot stood side by side a few paces back, both hulking and monstrous. At the corporal's side, Hedge nudged her again, and she turned to see that Blend had drawn back the flap. All right, let's get this done, Picker thought. Blend led the way, followed by Spindle, then Hedge. Picker waved the Napan and the Barghast forward, then followed them into the tent's dark confines. Even with Trots at one end and Detoran at the other, with Spindle and Hedge at the sides, the table had them staggering before they'd gone 3 paces. Blend moved ahead of them to pull the flap back as far as she could. Within the sorcerer's silence, the 4 soldiers managed to maneuver the massive table outside. Picker watched, glancing back at the divider every few moments, but the warlord made no appearance. So far, so good, she thought. The corporal and Blend added their muscles in carrying the table, and the 6 of them managed to take it 50 paces before exhaustion forced them to halt. Not much further, Spindle whispered. Detorin sniffed. They'll find it. That's a wager I'll call you on, Picker said. But first, let's get it there. Can't you make this thing any lighter? Hedge whined at Spindle. What kind of mage are you anyway? Spindle scowled. A weak one. What of it? Look at you. You're not even sweating. Quiet, you two, Picker hissed. Come on, heave her up now. Speaking of heaving, Hedge muttered, as amid a chorus of grunts, the table once again rose from the ground. When are you going to wash that disgusting shirt of yours, Spindle? Wash it? Mother never washed her hair when she was alive. Why should I start now? It'll lose its luster. Luster? Oh, you mean 50 years of sweat and rancid lard? Wasn't rancid when she was alive, though, was it? Thank hood, I don't know. Will you two save your foul breath? Which way now, Spindle? Right, down that alley, then left. The high tent at the end. Bet someone's living in it, Detorin muttered. You're on with that one too, Picker said. It's the one the river used to lay out Tista Andy corpses before cremation. Ain't been a killed Tisti since Darujistan. How do you find it anyway? Hedge asked. Spindle sniffed it out. Surprised he can sniff anything. All right, set it down. Blend the flap. The table filled the entire room within, with only an arm's length of space around it on all sides. The low cots that had been used for the corpses went beneath, folded and stacked. A shuttered lantern was lit and hung from the centre pole hook. Picker watched Hedge crouch down, his eyes inches from the table's scarred, pitted surface, and ran his blunt, battered fingers lovingly along the wood's grain. Beautiful, he whispered. He glanced up, met Picker's eyes. Call in the crew, Corporal. The game's about to start. Grinning, Picker nodded. Go get 'em, Blend. Even cuts, Hedge said, glaring at everyone. We're a squad now. Meaning you let us in on the secret, Spindle said, scowling. If we'd known you was cheating all that time. Yeah, well, your fortunes are about to turn, ain't they? So quit the complaining. Aren't you two a perfect match? Picker observed. So tell us, Hedge, how does this work? All positions, Corporal. Both decks are the real thing, you see. Fiddler had a better sensitivity, but Spindle should be able to pull it off. He faced the mage. You've done readings before, haven't you? You said, yeah, Squirt. No problem. I got the touch. You'd better, the sapper warned. He caressed the tabletop again. 2 layers, you see, with a fixed deck in between them. Lay a card down, and there's a tension formed, and it tells you which one the face-down one is. Never fails. Dealer knows every hand he plays out. Fiddler ain't here, Trotz growled, his arms crossed. He bared his teeth at Spindle. The mage sputtered. I can do it, you horse-brained savage. Watch me. Shut up, Picker snapped. They're coming. It was near dawn when the other squads began filing back out of the tent, laughing and backslapping as they jingled bulging purses. When the last of them had left, voices trailing away, Picker slumped wearily down on the table. Spindle, sweat dripping from his gleaming hair shirt, groaned and dropped his head, thumping against the thick wood. Stepping up behind him, Hedge raised a hand. At ease, soldier, Picker warned. Obviously the whole damn thing's been corrupted. Probably never worked to start with. It did. Me and Fid made damn sure. But it was stolen before you could try it out for real, wasn't it? That doesn't matter. I tell you. Everybody shut up, Spindle said, slowly raising his head, his narrow forehead wrinkled in a frown as he scanned the tabletop. Corrupted. You may have something there, Picker. He sniffed the air as if seeking a scent, then crouched down. Yeah, give me a hand, someone, with these here cots. No one moved. Help him, Hedge, Picker ordered. Help him crawl under the table. It's too late to hide. That's an order, soldier. Grumbling, the sapper lowered himself down. Together, the 2 men dragged the cots clear. Then Spindle edged beneath the table. A faint glow of sorcerous light slowly blossomed. Then the mage hissed. It's the underside, all right. Brilliant observation, Spindle. Bet there's legs, too. No, you fool. There's an image painted onto the underside. One big card, it looks like. Only I don't recognize it. Scowling, Hedge joined the mage. What are you talking about? We didn't paint no image underneath. Hood's mouldering moccasins. What is that? Bradoka, is my guess. Like something a Barghast would paint. Or a Rivy, Hedge muttered. Who's that figure in the middle? The one with the dog head on his chest? How should I know? Anyway, I'd say the whole thing is pretty fresh. Recent, I mean. Well, rub it off, damn it. Spindle crawled back out. Not a chance. The thing's webbed with wards, and a whole lot else besides. He straightened, met Picker's eyes, then shrugged. It's a new card, unaligned, without an aspect. I'd like to make a copy of it, deck-sized, and try it out with a reading. Whatever, Picker said. Hedge reappeared, suddenly energized. Good idea, Spin. You could charge for the readings too. If this new unaligned plays true, then you could work out the new tensions, the new relationships, and once you know them... Spindle groaned. We could run another game. Yeah. Detorin groaned. I have lost all my money. We all have, Picker snapped, glaring at the 2 sappers. It'll work next time, Hedge said. You'll see. Spindle was nodding vigorously. Sorry if we seem to lack enthusiasm, Blend drawled. Picker swung to the Barghast. Trots, take a look at that drawing. The warrior sniffed, then sank down to his hands and knees. It's gone dark, he said. Hedge turned to Spindle. Do that light trick again, you idiot! The mage sneered at the sapper, then gestured. The glow beneath the table returned. Trots was silent for a few moments, then he crawled back out and climbed upright. Well? Picker asked. The Barghast shook his head. Revy don't play with decks, Spindle said. Trots bared his teeth. Neither do Barghast. I need some wood, Spindle said, scratching the stubble lining his narrow jaw. And a stylus, he went on, ignoring everyone else. And paints. And a brush. They watched as he wandered out of the tent. Picker sighed, glared one last time at Hedge. Hardly an auspicious entry into the 7th Squad, Sapper. Ansie's heart damn near stopped when he lost his whole column. Your sergeant is probably gutting black-livered wood pigeons and whispering your name right now. Who knows? Your luck might change, and a demon won't hear him. Hedge scowled. Ha ha, I don't think she's kidding, Detoran said. Fine, Hedge snapped. I got a cusser waiting for it, and damned if I won't make sure I take you all with me. Team spirit, Trot said, his smile broadening. Picker grunted. All right, soldiers, let's get out of here. Harren and Silverfox stood apart from the others, watching the eastern sky grow light with streaks of copper and bronze. The last of the stars were withdrawing overhead, a cold, indifferent scatter surrendering to the warmth of a blue, cloudless day. Through the awkwardness of the hours just past, stretching interminably as a succession of pain and discomfort in Perrin's mind, emotional exhaustion had arrived, and with it a febrile calm. He had fallen silent, fearful of shattering that inner peace, knowing it to be nothing but an illusion, a pensively drawn breath within a storm. Tattersail must be drawn forth. He had indeed done that. The first meeting of their eyes had unlocked every shared memory, and that unlocking was an explosive curse for Perrin. A child, he thought. I face a child, and so recoil at the thought of intimacy, even if it had once been with a grown woman. The woman is no more. This is a child. But there was yet more to the anguish that boiled within the man. Another presence, entwined like wires of black iron through all that was Tattersail. Nightchill, the sorceress, once lover to Beladan. Where she had led, the Thellemen had followed. Anything but an equal relationship, and now, with Nightchill, had come a bitter, demanding presence. Bitter indeed, he thought. With Tayshrin, with the Empress and the Malazan Empire, and who knows what or who else. She knows she was betrayed at the enfiladed pale. Both her and, out there on the plain, Beladan, her mate. Silverfox spoke. You need not fear the Talan I mass. He blinked, shook himself. So you have explained, since you command them. We are all wondering, however, precisely what you plan with that undead army. What's the significance of this gathering? She sighed. It is very simple, really. They gather for benediction. Mine. He faced her. Why? I am a flesh and blood bone caster, the first such in hundreds of thousands of years. Then her face hardened. But we shall need them first, in their fullest power. There are horrors awaiting us all, in the Panyan Domin. The others must know of this benediction, what it means, Silverfox, and more of the threat that awaits us in the Panyan Domin. Brood, Kalor. She shook her head. My blessing is not their concern. Indeed, it is no one's concern but mine, and the clan I mass themselves. As for the Panyan, I myself must learn more before I dare speak. Perrin, I have told you these things for what we were, and for what we, have become. And what have we become? No, not a question for now. Janice and rule. She frowned. That is a side of you that I do not understand. But there is more, Perrin. She hesitated, then said, Tell me, what do you know of the Deck of Dragons? Almost nothing. But he smiled, for he heard Tattersail now, more clearly than at any other time since they'd first met. Silverfox drew a deep breath, held it a moment, then slowly released it, her veiled eyes once again on the rising sun. The Deck of Dragons, a kind of structure imposed on power itself. Who created it? No one knows. My belief, Tattersail's belief, is that each card is a gate into a warren, and there were once many more cards than there are now. There may have been other decks. There may well be other decks. He studied her. You have another suspicion, don't you? Yes, I said no one knows who created the Deck of Dragons, yet there is another entity equally mysterious, also a kind of structure, focused upon power itself. Think of the terminology used with the Deck of Dragons. Houses of dark, of light, of life, and death. She slowly faced him. Think of the word finest. Its meaning, as the Talan I mass know it, is hold of ice. Long ago, among the elder races, a hold was synonymous with a house in its meaning and common usage, and indeed, synonymous with warren. Where resides a Jaghut's wellspring of power? In a finest. She paused again, searching Perrin's eyes. Tremelor is Trellish for house of life. Finest, Perrin thought, as in Finest House, in Darujistan, a house of the Azarth. I've never heard of Tremelor. It is an Azarth house in 7 cities. In Malaz City, in your own empire, there is the Dead House, the House of Death. You believe the houses of the Azath and the houses of the Dek are one and the same. Yes, or linked somehow. Think on it. Perrin was doing just that. He had little knowledge of either, and could not think of any possible way in which he might be connected with them. His unease deepened, followed by a painful roil in his stomach. The captain scowled. He was too tired to think, yet think he must. It's said that the old emperor, Kellanved, and Dancer found a way into Deadhouse. Kellanved and Dancer have since ascended, and now hold the House of Shadow. Kellanved is Shadow Throne, and Dancer is Cotillion, the Rope, patron of assassins. The captain stared at her. What? Silver Fox grinned. It's obvious when you consider it, isn't it? Who among the Ascendants went after Lasine, with the aim of destroying her? Shadow Throne and Cotillion. Why would any Ascendant care one way or another about a mortal woman? Unless they thirsted for vengeance. Perrin's mind raced back to a road on the coast of Itko Khan, to a dreadful slaughter, wounds made by huge, bestial jaws. Hounds, he thought. Hounds of Shadow, Shadow Throne's pups. From that day, the captain had begun a new path, on the trail of the young woman Cotillion had possessed. From that day, his life had begun its fated unravelling. Wait, Kellanved and Dancer went into Deadhouse? Why didn't they take that aspect, the aspect of the House of Death? I've thought about that myself, and have arrived at one possibility. The realm of death was already occupied, Perrin. The king of High House Death is Hood. I believe now that each Azath is home to every gate, a way into every warren. Gain entry to the house, and you may choose. Kellanved and Dancer found an empty house, an empty throne, and upon taking their places as Shadow's rulers, the House of Shadow appeared, and became part of the Deck of Dragons. Do you see? Perrin slowly nodded, struggling to take it all in. Tremors of pain twisted his stomach. He pushed them away. But what has this to do with me? He thought. The House of Shadow was once a hold, Silver Fox went on. You can tell. It doesn't share the hierarchical structure of the other houses. It is bestial, a wilder place, and apart from the hounds, it knew no ruler for a long, long time. What are the decks unaligned? She shrugged. Failed aspects? The imposition of chance, of random forces? The Azath and the deck are both impositions of order, but even order needs freedom, lest it solidify and become fragile. And where do you think I fit in? I'm nothing, Silver Fox, a stumble-footed mortal. Gods, leave me out of all this, he thought, all that you seem to be leading up to. Please. I've thought long and hard on this, Perrin. Anamanda Rake is Knight of the House of Dark, she said. Yet where is the house itself? Before all else, there was Dark, the mother who birthed all. So it must be an ancient place, a hold, or perhaps something that came before holds themselves. A focus for the gate into Kurald Galain. Undiscovered, hidden, the first wound, with a soul trapped in its maw, thus sealing it. A soul, Perrin murmured, a chill clambering up his spine. Or a legion of souls? The breath hissed from Silver Fox. Before houses, there were holds, Perrin continued with remorseless logic. Both fixed, both stationary, settled. Before settlement, there was wandering. House from hold, hold from... A gate, in motion, ceaseless motion. He squeezed shut his eyes. A wagon, burdened beneath the countless souls, sealing the gate into dark. And I sent 2 hounds through that wound, he thought. I saw the seal punctured. By the abyss. Perrin, something has happened. To the Deck of Dragons. A new card has arrived. Unaligned yet, I think, dominant. The deck has never possessed a master. She faced him. I now believe it has one. You. His eyes snapped open. He stared at her in disbelief, then scorn. Nonsense, Silver Fox. Not me. You are wrong. You must be. I am not. My hand was guided in fashioning the card that is you. What card? She did not answer, continued as if she had not heard him. Was it the Azath that guided me, or some other unknown force? I do not know. Denies and rule, the wanderer within the sword. She met his eyes. You are a new unaligned, Ganois Perrin. Birth by accident, or by some purpose, the need of which only the Azath know. You must find the answer for your own creation. You must find the purpose behind what you have become. His brows rose mockingly. You set for me a quest? Really, Silver Fox? Aimless, purposeless men do not undertake quests. That's for wall-eyed heroes in epic poems. I don't believe in goals. Not anymore. They're naught but self-delusions. You set for me this task, and you shall be gravely disappointed, as shall the Azath. An unseen war has begun, Perrin. The warrens themselves are under assault. I can feel the pressure within the Deck of Dragons, though I have yet to rest a hand upon one. An army is being assembled, perhaps, and you, a soldier, are part of that army. Oh, yes. So speaks Tattersail, he thought. I have enough wars to fight, Silver Fox. Her eyes glistened as she looked up at him. Perhaps, Ganois Perrin, they are all one war. I'm no dujek or brood. I can't manage all these campaigns. It's tearing me apart. I know. You cannot hide your pain from me. I see it in your face, and it breaks my heart. He looked away. I have dreams as well. A child within a wound, screaming. Do you run from that child? Aye, he admitted shakily. Those screams are terrible. You must run towards the child, my love. Flight will close your heart. He turned to her. My love? Words to manipulate my heart, he thought. Who is that child? She shook her head. I don't know. A victim in the unseen war, perhaps. She attempted to smile. Your courage has been tested before, Baron, and it did not fail. Grimacing, he muttered. There's always a first time. You are the wanderer within the sword. The card exists. I don't care. Nor does it, she retorted. You don't have any choice. He rounded on her. Nothing new in that. Now ask Opon how well I performed. His laugh was savage. I doubt the twins will ever recover. The wrong choice, Tattersall. I'm ever the wrong choice. She stared up at him, then, infuriatingly, simply shrugged. Suddenly deflated, Perrin turned away. His gaze fell on the Mybe, Whiskey Jack, Mallet, and Quickben. The four had not moved in all this time. Their patience. Damn it, their faith, he thought, made the captain want to scream. You chose wrongly, every damned one of you. But he knew they would not listen. I know nothing of the deck of dragons, he said dully. If we've the time, I will teach you. If not, you will find your own way. Perrin closed his eyes. The pain in his stomach was returning, rising, a slowly building wave he could no longer push back. Yes, of course, he thought. Tattersall could do no less than she has done. There you have it then, Whiskey Jack. She now leads and the others follow. A good soldier is Captain Ganoes Perrin. In his mind he returned to that fraught, nightmarish realm within the sword Dragnipur, the legions of chained souls ceaselessly dragging their impossible burden. And at the heart of the wagon, a cold, dark void, from whence came the chains. The wagon carries the gate into Curald Ghislaine, the warren of darkness, he thought. The sword gathers souls to seal it. Such a wound it must be, to demand so many souls. He grunted at a wave of pain. Silver Fox's small hand reached up to touch his arm. He almost flinched at the contact. I will fail you all. Chapter 5.